Hi, today I'll be presenting for the final research project, option B, oral history presentation slides. I'm Sophie, and this is for Vietnamese American culture and experience. Table of contents, biographical info, migration and settlement, intergroup relations, identity and future, conclusion, and references. This is my dad featuring. This year he's 56 and he was born in Saigon, Vietnam on March 16th, 1970. When he immigrated to the US at 21, he started going to community college and transferred to UC Berkeley where he completed his bachelor's in computer science. He's been working as a software engineer at Apple over a decade, and some things he likes to do on his free time is watching and playing a variety of sports and traveling. Back in Vietnam after the fall of Saigon, his mom had to work on running a small shop to sell whatever they could, like rice, fish sauce, etc. And life was really rough. His father, before the communist takeover, was a successful businessman and pilot, but got sent to re-education camp where he was tragically punished after being caught escaping. His mother had to stop education early in high school due to familial situations and hardships, while his dad was able to study abroad in France. He has four siblings, two sisters, and two brothers, all having careers in tech once moving to the US. Life growing up poor in the communist regime was full of hardships and struggle. Vietnam was a constant war-ridden state even after the American War in Vietnam. When he was only 6 years old, my dad got sent to his dad got sent to re-education camp where his mom had to support them all, and there was barely any food on the table. His life was going to school for a better stable life and recreationally playing soccer since it didn't require much equipment. Migration and settlements. My dad went from Saigon to the US, San Jose, initially Fremont. My dad went to America because of the communist government mistreating their family since his father worked for the pro-South government. He was able to come to America due to the resilience of his older sister, my oldest aunt back bung. She tried escaping many times but got caught and had to go to prison. But the last time she managed to escape through the north route to Vinh Ha Long Bay and she had to steal a government boat and take the different route. She had failed and had to use a backup boat, and afterwards there was a storm and the boat had to get taken out and broke. She had to swim under the boat to get debris under the wheel, and w- once she was able to fix it, they arrived at Hong Kong shore to replace, and they had to replace and sell belongings for oil to run the boat. She was able to meet up with her aunt and uncle who lived in Hong Kong after escaping on the night of the fall of Saigon 7 years prior. A few years later, his sister's uncle was able to sponsor her to the US in the 80s through the Refugee Act of 1980 after living in America for a decade. She was able to sponsor the rest of the family to America in 1991. My aunt was a refugee by boat in the second wave in 1982, while my dad and his family went by airplane in the third wave as a refugee by plane in 1991, greeted by his sister and uncle.
When he arrived at America, him and his family stayed with my aunt, who had a home in Fremont or Newark. Life was just to study and go home while on financial aid for tuition until he was able to transfer to Berkeley after 3 years. He was able to find a job pretty quickly in community college as a tutor and then a tech internship. Although he majored in something different in Vietnam, when he was in the US, tech was just starting up and his whole family pursued it. Identity and future. His identity. My dad sees himself as Vietnamese American, while in Vietnam, he did not celebrate much traditions other than Tet. Life in Vietnam was melancholy, and he was more focused on his living situation in school. When he went to the US, he still practiced Tet to Vietnam since Vietnamese was still a part of him in childhood and in heritage, so he cannot forget it. Due to the Silicon Valley being incredibly diverse in ethnicities and races, he knows a lot of friends from work that are Chinese, Vietnamese, and Indian. He gets along with a lot of ethnic groups and experience a little bit and although he experienced a little bit of marginalization and microaggression when it came to group settings, the way he describes it is something you could feel, but it wasn't direct. He does not have a problem with me marrying anybody outside of Vietnamese people and would like to pass national traditions like that, like spending time with family to us. Him and my mom also enrolled us in Vietnamese classes growing up so we could soak up the language, although my speaking isn't too good. Although he didn't know much about America prior to moving, he knew that he would have more opportunity. When he got to Berkeley, he felt his life was headed towards a better path. His happiest and most impactful moments were getting in a prestigious school in Vietnam and his first paycheck in the US. Like many first generation immigrants, he only strives for a stable life where he can overcome the hardships he faced in childhood so he could live a privileged life.
Young or Nguyen Young. Biographical info. Nguyen Young, my maternal grandma or Bang Wai. She's 82 years old and she was born in Vietnam in 1944. Although she is long retired now at, well, 82, if my family could describe her, it would be smart, skilled, and quick. From her life in Vietnam as the oldest daughter in a poor family of eight, she has always had to get used to studying and having a better life despite having to take care of her siblings and support her family. Now she spends her time at home cooking for my family and learning new hobbies. Her parents owned a tailor shop in Vietnam before the time they had to of the communist takeover. She has three sisters and two brothers. She remembers a time when she remembers a time when Vietnam was at war and her life was filled with hardship and danger. Too many families had loved ones who had to leave. She described it as truly sad. Migration and settlement. At first, my grandma and the rest of our family, not including my grandpa, had to go from Vietnam to Thailand and wait for the paperwork to be done with before they could go to the San Jose or be sponsored to San Jose. Journey to America. After the 1975 communist takeover, my grandpa was imprisoned in a re education camp from the North for being on the South Army for 8 years until 1983. He was able to escape out of Vietnam and went by foot to Cambodia, then to Thailand, where he was able to get sponsored to America as a refuge during Wave 2. 10 years later, during Wave 3, my grandpa, my grandma, and my mom and aunt were able to escape to Thailand. He was able to sponsor our family to the US in Wave 3 by airplane from Thailand to the US. They landed in San Jose, where my grandpa was able to support the family through his small apartment and secondary job for electric component assembly line. Life was difficult for them since they were barely scraping up enough money to immigrate to America, and they often had to move apartments due to rent increases. My grandma got a job through an agency also as an electric component assembler for over 10 plus years. In her neighborhood, there were a lot of immigrants. They were poor, but since there was only one person working initially, they had to accept their situation. Our immediate family is in San Jose, while my aunt's family is in Sacramento, while her siblings and extended family, my grandma's, are mostly in Vietnam. Identity and future. She sees herself as ethnically Vietnamese but also American and continues to celebrate Vietnamese holidays like that but also American holidays as well. Buddhism is still a big part of her life and she follows many religious practices. She gets along with people of other ethnicities in her apartment. However, she is more close with Vietnamese and Chinese people. She prefers America over Vietnam's oppressive and communist regime and felt as if America was a new hope for a better, stable life. Now being retired, her wishes were fulfilled and her children having stable lives and families with a close bond. In conclusion, commonalities between the interviews. They both went to America for a better quality of life after living in Vietnam in a war-ridden country. They were also sponsored to Vietnam via other family members risking their lives and also being broken apart in very different ways. However, lots of hardships regardless and trauma. They had a lot of economic struggles coming to the US and honestly were really just focused on trying to survive and live a stable life even after in the US. Um, in conclusion, I really enjoyed interviewing my family, even though I put it off for really long. It helped me get a unique individual perspective on the diaspora and the opportunities given from their persistence. Their their opportunities really shed light, on on how their reality has always been surviving and trying to live a stable life so we could grow up for success. Academic references. I chose Perfume Dreams by Andrew Lamb because it exemplifies the unspoken experience that was by the the unspoken experience of Vietnamese refugees that thought life was suffering. For both my interviewees, they both described their life in Vietnam as a blur and looked back at America as a new opportunity, a new identity shown through the American dream. My grandma told me that for her as a parent during the Vietnam War, Vietnam was not the same as it was before 1975. For both families, life has always been difficult for them in Vietnam. Growing up poor in a big family, having to study and zone out all the trauma, similar to the trauma from their life. Andrew mentions that in a country full of hardships and warfare, there was never really a luxurious happy ending for them even after moving to the US. So they passed their dreams on to their children, similar to my dad and grandpa. My dad, for my dad, he describes when his father died in the re education camp by being caught escaping. Even though he doesn't talk much about it, I feel truly sorry for his experiences and how he still strives to be better for me and my brother. I was lucky enough to live in a community with many of my people and still be able to attend a great school without having to worry if I was going to ever go hungry or lose my house. Especially that I didn't live during times of war or hardship. I chose for my second source the 43rd of Black the 43rd Black April commemoration in San Jose as my second source since it exemplifies the sacrifices made during the war and it teaches younger generations about the past and helps them understand the obstacles refugees had to overcome to get their place in America. I think that for the first generation, kids that came over to America had to experience the struggles of having to hastily assimilate into a society that was new to them, even only after knowing the trauma that had riddled their lives. To have to leave the culture they knew behind to partially to fit in and having to learn quick English quickly to translate for their families. These children's resilience displays the tragedy and impact of war on a country riddled with bloodshed for centuries. Black April is a celebration of the families that were split from the war and awareness on the for the watershed that continued to break Vietnam even after the American War. For source 3, I chose How the End of the Vietnam War ch- Caused a Refugee Crisis by Dave Ruse, history.com. The American War represented more than just a failed military intervention from Americans, but also the immense immigration crisis it caused for Vietnamese people. For many Vietnamese families, they were often tortured and faced retribution from the North Communist government for their crimes for being on immigration, the South government, or being South loyalist. To leave Vietnam was to burn a part of them that they could not be associated with anymore, for they had to be refugees to survive, and for all the family members that were lost to continue their legacy. For the brave refugees who schemed plans to escape risking prison time or their lives if caught or draining little economic resources, they could escape Vietnam towards the southeast countries via Wave 2. Traveling by boat was often filled with hardship and trauma, where women could be raped by men at sea and stolen of the resources that they could the little that they could carry. For the Vietnamese, it was not just a war that helped fight an oppressive regime, but a war that was poorly handled and caused generations of children to be disconnected from their roots and caused generational trauma. Thank you for listening.